Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, all our loyal listeners. We have a great day today. We're talking about football. We're talking about the NFL draft, which is in Las Vegas. But we do have people here in Kansas City, St. Louis, and hopefully people out at the stadium can keep us up to date, the reaction out at Arrowhead. But first of all, I'd like to just introduce Mr. Jim Nunley, formerly known as Granddad, when he headed up the Generational Rap organization at KPRS, the Quarter Broadcast. He's been in the health field for as long as. He's from Columbia, Missouri, and he is a part and probably one of the people that initiated Monday Night Football. So, Mr. Jim Nunley, tell us where you are, how you got started, and the reason that we are broadcasting from Ferguson, St. Louis, Kansas City, our show on the NFL draft.
Okay, you mean where I got started in healthcare or where I got started with football?
Well, both. You're very skilled in a lot of areas.
Okay, well, I came to town. Thank you for inviting me, by the way, and hello to all your listeners. But I came to Kansas City about 52 or 53 years ago to build the first Wayne Minor Rogers Health Center. And that was my task, and that's why I came to town. But when I got here, I was only supposed to stay a couple of years. And in the process, they were building, there was a builder's strike, a construction strike, so we couldn't build it at the time. So anyway, Arrowhead was part of that. So I went out to meet the people at Arrowhead, and only to find that there were lots of African-American men who were in line to buy tickets and whatever. So anyway, out of that grew the Monday Night Football, because in 1970 was the first Monday Night Football game telecast nationwide, and we were part of that. So we've been around and writing everything.
You had, I don't know if he's still connected, but you had that young man who's now our congressman, Emmanuel Cleaver. He was a part of your group.
That's right, and many people don't know, but he was a college athlete down at Prairie View, and of course he got injured. He was a kicker. He was actually after point and field goal kicker, and he hit shortly early before he came here, and so we found out about that and invited him to become a part of our group, and he's been a part of the group ever since.
What name y'all call? Was it Belma?
No, we call him Bubba.
Bubba, that's right, Bubba. I knew that had something to do with B.
Yeah, that was his nickname growing up. That's what his sisters called him, and I think it was Wichita Falls, Texas, or certainly Waxahachie, Texas.
Yeah, that's where he was born.
Yeah.
Waxahachie. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so I know it's an Indian name, but nonetheless, many people. But he also was a singer. He sang with a group at Murray State, was where he started, and he sang with a group, and it was called the Athletes. And so he just fits right in, and he knows a lot about football. He really does. And then, of course, you remember Arrowhead was built during his time as an elected official here. And, of course, the Chiefs have been trying to get to the Super Bowl under his mayorship, but he didn't make it. And so, anyway, he's quite a football fan. He's quite knowledgeable.
Well, I know Otis Taylor, a good friend of mine, played at Prairie View, and Emmanuel would always say, "Oh, football injury," and you kind of back that up. But we're glad we got him in this position. He's really been to be from Texas, and to do the things he's done so far is really remarkable. We just got to continue getting out to vote. Now, what was your role as far as athlete was concerned before starting Monday Night Football?
Okay, well, like I said, I was the administrative director over at Rogers Health Center, or Wayne Minor Health Center it was when I started. And, of course, my job was to fill it up and make it pay, and I stayed there. That's one of the few times I've been back and forth to that job 3 times during my tenure. I left and came back, left and came back. And, of course, the last time I went on to combat and kind of ended my professional career. But over a span of 50 years, I've seen that place grow and prosper. And, of course, if you look at the area now, it's nothing like what it used to be when I first came. The whole Wayne Minor area was a real crime-ridden area. And today it stands as a bastion of hope. But there's all kind of housing and fire stations, and Gates Barbecue is down in that area. Lots of housing, and it's just, I was just down there today, and it's really a major uplift to see that happen over my lifetime.
You know, also, you said you came back on the health situation, but you are an articulate and person with experience when you tell the people about the people who are diabetics.
That's true. Well, being in healthcare for so long, one of the things I used to always wonder about, MC, is why the language of healthcare was so different. You know, people on the street call it one thing, and then the doctors talk to you in another language about the same problem. And I remember going to school at the University of Michigan, and of course they kind of talk in jargon as well. And so I wrote my final paper. I just didn't know anything about the names they were calling us, so I wrote it in plain language. And the guy, the professor, kind of cited me out, and I thought he was going to scorn me for not following instructions. But I ended up being written in his book, and one of the professor's book. Well, I said that to say this, that from that I began to get real sensitive to the language of healthcare, because something as simple as we used to call it piles growing up, and today it's hemorrhoidal infections. And somehow or another that it might not translate well to the people who have the hemorrhoid. They think it's another disease, or really you don't have a chance to talk in the language with the people. And that's what we try to do with diabetes. We call it plain talk about diabetes, making it plain so that people can understand the language that the doctor and the people are talking about when they have diabetes. The language and the words get in the way. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you've been an excellent spokesperson, and of course I know we had you on Guess Who's Coming to Kansas City, you and your wife, when I was doing something at KKFI. Now, also, do we have our persons from Arrowhead on the show yet?
I'm here.
Who is this?
This is Pastor Timothy Hayes.
Okay, we do have. You have your dad with you there too.
Well, the draft that is over with now. We have the party.
Okay. Well, we have Mr. Jim Nundy on. He won the Monday Night Football, and he's all around here in Kansas City, well known the things that he does, and he said he's been at least 52 years. You wouldn't even thought of them, were you?
No, for my time.
Well, what's happening out to Arrowhead? Mr. Pastor Timothy Hayes Jr., he's been a Chiefs fan, I know, when he's in college. Everything, he don't even miss games. He go there all the time, and he told me that he's going to be out there today. I guess that's why the rain stopped while we're talking, because earlier it was pouring down. But tell us, Tim, what's going on out? Pastor Hayes, tell us what's going on out at Arrowhead.
Well, they had the draft test today where they had all the first 3-round draft picks. Okay, hold on. They had the first 3-round draft picks all in attendance voted. And they had a lot of events going on out there. A chance to walk around the locker room and meet the Hall of Honor and all types of good stuff. It was a good event.
Okay, Pastor Hayes and Mr. Jim Nunn, kind of tell us what happened with the Chiefs today in the NFL draft.
Yeah, so if you go first, Pastor Hayes, you're more familiar with it. Go ahead. Yeah, well, the Chiefs selected a cornerback in a defense.
Folks, could we speak a little louder, please?
In the first round, and they followed up with a wide receiver and a couple other defensive players, linebackers and such. But overall, this is that the Chiefs had an A+ grade with the draft today. The last couple of days, they filled all their major holes. Okay, and they also were able to find some replacements and get some depth in the lineup. So all in all, we as a Chiefs fan, I think it's overall convinced we all pretty happy and satisfied.
Well, I can hear that you got King there with you, right?
Everywhere I go.
That's your son. Nunley, tell us about your thoughts on the cornerback that Chiefs draft. Somebody said he wasn't regular size. I don't know what that means. And I've been watching on TV on the NFL network. And where did he come from? Did he come from LSU? They say he's really, well, of course, the Chiefs saying he's the best thing that happened to them. And let me just throw this out, too. Normally, what do these people draft somebody in the first round, the second round, the third player? They always say, that's who we wanted to be available, like they knew in advance. I know they probably got a lot of prospects, but all of them tell you, that's the one we wanted. We didn't know if you're going to be available, but we had to trade up or trade down. So kind of give us kind of an explanation, at least our listener audience and myself and the people up in Ferguson and St. Louis, your opinion on that. And this guy, who is he? How tall is he? And what are the expectations from your perspective?
Okay, well, first of all, you know, the draft is kind of an indication of what you're worried about your team. So if you take in the first round a defensive back, that means that you're a little worried about the secondary, and or if you draft a lot of defensive players, it means that you're worried about getting the ball back. But with that in mind, a cornerback is supposed to be the fastest reactor on the team because the offensive receiver can go, they know where they're going. But the cornerback or the person that covers them has to be have unusual recovery speed. And recovery means that if they get out of step, they got to get back real quickly. Well, I'm stumbling here for the guy's name, but he's known to have quick recovery speed. And of course, and if I remember, there's about 5 first or second round draft picks from Georgia, which, if you remember, Georgia beat Alabama in the SEC Conference Bowl in Atlanta. I was there last year when that happened, but this year I wasn't able to make it. So it's kind of, the draft is kind of an indication of what a coach or what the front office is worried about. And I would say from the totality of the draft, and especially since they picked a cornerback in the first round, that they would be most worried about that. And you remember we had a very young secondary this time around. Lots of youngsters. They seemed to have the recovery, but they didn't have basic coverage skills. And so I guess they're just going to beef that up. That would be my indication.
Pastor Hayes, can you tell us more about the person they selected as their first person in the draft?
Yes, sir. So we had 2 first round picks, and one of them is by a guy from, I'm looking to draw the blank. What school did he go to? I ain't heard it. He went to Washington University, the same place where Marcus Peters came from. The last 2 years, he has not given up a touchdown. Last year, don't quote me, but I want to say that he had 16 receptions for 111 yards.
Interception.
No, 16 receptions and 111 yards that he gave up all year.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah. And the average per catch, 3 yards per catch. So he's what we call a solidified shutdown corner. He can play inside. He can play slot. He can play outside. Everybody, the one knack that they had against him is that, of course, he's 5'11", 6 foot. I actually had the opportunity to meet him today. So he's a little bit taller than me, so he's not little as they tried to first day him to be. But he's a competitor out of Washington. We got him with the 21st pick. Then with the 30th pick, we got a guy who they have coined as the Greek Freak. He's from Greece. He's a defensive end. And basically the comparisons that we are been hearing in town is that we basically got a Marcus Peters without all the off-field drama. And then we got a Gerald Allen, part 2. And if those picks can pan out to be, Marcus Peters and Gerald Allen with what we already have in-house, I see the Super Bowl back in our near future. But come back and piggyback off what Mr. Nunley said, and we on the radio, so I just got to call him Granddad. Yeah. Piggyback off what Granddad said, the Chiefs definitely were very aggressive on the defensive side throughout the draft. I believe outside of the wide receiver, Scott Moore, I believe we got an offensive tackle from Kentucky also. And, I know they're probably not listening. They're probably still in the draft room as the draft is still going. But hats off to our front office. Not only did we get good players, but we got them for good value at the same time. Our first 4 or 5 picks were all top 70 rated picks according to Pro Football Focus. And we were able to spread them out through the first 3 rounds. And so...
And I want to amplify on that, Reverend Hayes. It's kind of interesting that the front office changes a lot of times. Sometimes people mistakenly believe that the head coach picks the players. That's not true. They have a special rotating general manager that comes in every 3 or 4 years, and they sort of have the ability to clean house if necessary, or cut salaries or whatever. And the one thing that most people don't talk about this year is that this is the first year that Patrick Mahomes' salary is going to be counted against the salary cap. Now, the salary cap is just that. It's an amount over which you cannot pay salaries. So all the combined salaries are put in a total, and you've got to work within that salary total to pay your players. So that means that somebody real highly paid, like Mahomes, will take up a large amount of that salary budgeted amount, and it means that you have to get players cheaper. So you have to let some players go because you have to lower the amount, and that's what happened to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill was commanding a lot of money, and I don't remember the guy out at Las Vegas, but they made him a receiver like for 5 years and $140 million. Well, the Chiefs elected that they couldn't pay Tyreek that, so they traded him away for a cheaper player. And when I say cheaper, I don't mean it in value. I just mean cheaper in dollars. But that's what they have to do in the draft. They have to find newer players to replace older players, generally at a lot less money. And if you talk about the Honey Badger, like he's still kind of on the ropes right now because he's indecisive. As the Chiefs are indecisive as to whether or not they can pay him the amount of money and still stay under the salary cap. All right, there you go, MC.
Oh, okay. But Pastor Hayes, I don't know. You got a thing that you don't miss any of the games, and you just even though you went to Vasile and not Lincoln, you just a grassroots Chief players, and ever since I've been knowing you all your life, that it's nothing the Chiefs can do that you don't agree with. Not to say they make all the plays, because if they did, we'd be Super Bowl winners again. But on the same token, I think, and I know when the games appear on Sunday, how do you work it out to preach and be at the games on those Sundays they're playing here?
Well, and people mistaken that I moved service up earlier because I was a Chiefs fan. But no, our musician was playing at another church at the time, and so we went up to an earlier service to get a better musician. And in happiness stands, I ended up becoming a season ticket holder the same year. But it's an art to it. We get in church, and we're normally out by 11:30. So on the 12 o'clock games, I'm normally there in my seat by first quarter, mid-first quarter. But
and Reverend Hayes, let me try this on you. There are 7 of us still alive in Monday Night Football, and we were among the first season ticket holders when the Chiefs came to town. Wow. And the Chiefs season tickets at that time for 5 games was $35. Can you imagine that?
$35 is the cost of
That's right, exactly. Today, 50 years later. And we played over at the 22nd and Brooklyn site, which was the site of the old municipal stadium.
Yes, sir.
And the players didn't have a locker room over there. They had to drive their cars in and change in their cars for the uniform. Now, that's how far back we go. So when you say Arrowhead, and now we held on to our season tickets for about 40 years, and we had to give them up. They got too expensive. They went from $35 a season to over $200 a season. And so they asked us to make an advance, and of course it was just a little bit too much money to put in, but the seats are even more expensive today.
Oh, yeah.
And so I know about what you're paying.
Yeah, it's kind of outrageous. Last year was actually higher than it was this year. They actually came down simply because, we talked to our sales rep, and we're like, hey, the guys in our area are paying tremendously less than us. And he's like, well, they've been there forever, 10 years, 20 years, and so they got that value as you're speaking of. But he did work us out as a small deal where we were able to come down a little bit, actually, on our tickets this year. But they're still north of $1,000 a seat. And we're no near the deal. We're up top.
Yeah, I understand. And my wife and I had seats in the gold section. And they were just outrageous at that point. But but it also signals the success of the Chiefs, exactly. And they still say they're 4th or 5th when it comes to most expensive seats. That there are people who are higher. And of course, we used to travel around the country and follow the teams. And even Oakland, out in what they call the Black Hole, way back when, which was really a sad stadium. They actually were higher in ticket prices than Kansas City. And of course, then when you get to areas like Washington, D.C., and even Denver, the ticket prices are quite high. And the Las Vegas Raiders now are among the highest season prices in the whole NFL.
Yes, sir.
Well,
that's true.
But you have to admit, Reverend Hayes, they're kind of a social class thing to have season tickets to the Chiefs, and it always has been. Okay,
it's a blessing. I don't take it for granted. As today was the draft that sports season ticket members and teams. And we were able to experience the remodels that they made and look at the new changes and see some things along those lines. It was a privilege, and I don't take it for granted. And as Mr. Richardson has mentioned, I've been a Chiefs fan my whole entire life. My son, when I was telling him what I was doing today, he didn't want to go to work with me, but he said, I want to go to the Chiefs. So he went out. I actually made a post on Facebook a couple hours ago and said he doesn't understand how lucky he is, to be able to experience, season tickets with the Chiefs and the Royals from the time that he was born.
Approximately how many people are out there today, Reverend?
I know, and this is the running joke. I believe that there was more Chiefs fans there today than there will be at the Royals game tonight in the Yankees going down.
Speaking of the Royals, you said that you and your father, y'all supposed to meet Royal sometime next week, aren't you?
Yes. So part of our season tickets with the Royals that they offered us come out and to have a suite and things along those lines. So we're not sure what's all entitled. We're just going to go out, have a good time.
And Reverend Hayes, I want to mention to you, since you're a Royals fan as well, I was selected to sit in the Buck O'Neil seat. They give tickets to somebody, and I'm going to be part of the Royals game on June the 7th. So maybe you and I can hook up for dinner before that. I'd be glad to make you my guest.
I will gladly be there. We can definitely make that happen. June the 7th.
Not with the seats, but at least with getting ready to go to the game. Okay?
Yeah. I have season tickets, so I just like tonight. I'm just not going to let Tilly out. I have the kids, but I got the tickets. I would love to be there as long as I'm in town.
All right. Well, very good. And the other thing that sometimes people don't talk about MC is that the Chiefs' original game, or the home bet played, was in our community at 22nd and Brooklyn. Yeah. They played there from 1963 through the season of 1972. Now, the reason I bring that up is because if you are 50 years, you don't know anything but Arrowhead.
Yeah.
But there was one time they played on a dirt field, a converted baseball field, over at 22nd and Brooklyn, where the Athletics used to play. Now, that little history means nothing because there's no commemoration whatsoever, except for a plaque that they finally gave us. But we kept saying that everybody thinks the Chiefs only played at Arrowhead. That's not true. They played right in the middle of the black community at 22nd and Brooklyn when they got started here in 1963. So, Reverend Hayes, you'd be sure to tell your congregation about that. But most importantly, tell all your young friends that, because they ain't always been at Arrowhead.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and the other thing, which I would like to take pride in, and I tell the young police officers, that during that 8-year span that they played at 22nd and Brooklyn, there was never a serious felony committed. The close they got to it was a broken out window on one of the players' cars. And people came from Johnson County and everywhere to support the Chiefs. And there was never an issue, never a steal, never any stolen cars, nothing of the magnitude that people thought would happen to them by them playing in the middle of the hood. So we ought to be proud of that fact, but we ought to never let the Chiefs forget that.
Well, that's true, and I know, Reverend, you was there that Christmas Day when the Chiefs played Miami. It's been the longest football game, and if I remember correctly, it was about 75 degrees that Christmas, and they came back and beat us. The little field goal kicker they had beat us in the longest game ever played, and a dispensation. Then also Lincoln University and Langston and a lot used to play at 22nd and Brooklyn, where the people would park cars in the yard, charge them, I think, about $5 at the time until Sam opened up the parking lot. But this is something we all went through. People would sit on the who lives on Brooklyn across the street. They would go on the second floor and sit outdoors and watch the games.
That's right. Well, you see, what I'm saying to you is we have a closer tie with the Chiefs than even the Chiefs front office knows about. In other words, that when all the players like Bobby Bell and all of those bought their fancy cars with the amount of money that they were given at the time, they parked their cars on the lawns of people who lived in that area. And that was before Sam's club,
right.
Sam's Park and Cane. And I only bring all this history up because our attachment with the Chiefs goes way back. And I continue to write about it every chance I get to remind people that the Chiefs, we adopted the Chiefs. That's the way I feel about the black community. And because there were HBCU players who could not live or eat in places where that they were rest of the Chiefs ate. Now that's a fact. And so the Chiefs hung out at places like Maxine, and they built their businesses, their side businesses, right in our community. And so I'm saying there's a close attachment with the Chiefs, especially the early Chiefs, and today. And it's a sad commentary that today that they have sort of blackballed some of the clubs and things in this area for Chiefs players. Now, I don't want to go into all that, and I don't have a lot of animosity about it, but I'm only saying there was a time when Buck Buchanan and Willie Lanier and Willie Mitchell and Gloucester Richardson, Otis Taylor, all of those guys walked around in our community because that's where they had to be, because segregation had it so that you could not or would not or wasn't welcome in other parts of the Kansas City area. And the other thing I wanted to sharpen us about is when we were talking about Bubba Cleaver or Reverend Cleaver or Congressman Cleaver, he was a teammate with Otis Taylor at Prairie View. And Otis was a quarterback. He was not a wide receiver. But it was commonplace at that time to draft quarterbacks, but convert them either to safety, and in this case, a wide receiver. So Otis made All-Pro in a position that he was not familiar with and did not play in college. Now, that's a little, what they call it, a trivia question, but it's really something to think about, because at that time, black people weren't thought to be capable of being a quarterback. And if you notice, Lynn Dawson was probably played quarterback right on up until Bill Kinney's time, I believe, or Mike Livingston. I can't remember who placed him, but up until Patrick Mahomes, we hadn't had anything that would resemble a person of color as a quarterback. And that just happened, 2019, 2017, or whatever. All right. But anyway, just a little trivia there for you.
Well, if you just tune in, you listen to a very successful show by two well and learned players, one 50 years plus, the other one just turned 30, but they both know football. They like the sport, and we're very fortunate to have both of them to join us today. Not only Jim at his place, we'll say office, and then Tim, or Reverend Hayes, he's actually out there at the stadium. And I don't know what, and they took his son. He got a son named King, and I was so proud when it came over last time I saw him. He said, Paul Richardson, that's just to throw that back at you, Granddad.
Okay, well, I tell you what, they have to call you something, and I can tell you this. One day I was at a place a bar place, and somebody called me an OG, and I got a little offended because I thought that OG meant, something disrespectful. And of course, the young man took me aside and he said, "That's one of the highest honors that you can pay an older gentleman in our time. So if we don't know your name, we just call you OG." But he went on to explain that there were very few OGs alive. And that sort of meant that when they call you OG, it kind of means that you've been here for a while, but they respect your being able to escape all of the things of sickness and ill health and crime and murder and all those sort of things that add to an early death. And so when they say OG, I now smile because I truly am an OG.
Well, Reverend Hayes, you in the community and not too far from the Municipal Stadium, where it used to be at 22nd and Brooklyn, right down from my old school, Lincoln High School. But what's your church, the name of it, and where are you located?
We're on 2456 Park Avenue in the old Bowers Memorial Building now. And that is directly around the corner from the old stadium. And as stated, there's nothing but a few plaques there that they just installed over the last few years. Grateful for it. But it just now became a part. They're actually, invested in building the area up. There's some nice new homes there. And, of course, the Lincoln Tigers, which for the last 5 years or so, I guess I have been a fan with family going there and succeeding, and a couple of other students that I formerly coached, all going D1 out of Lincoln Tigers under the realm of Coach William Lowe. But we're right there in that area, and it's still, you would never imagine now, 2022, that the Chiefs, played right there around the corner. And I was hearing you guys talk about, $5 parking, and now to park outside of the gate across the street from Arrowhead is $30, sometimes $40, the closer you get to the gate. And so, man, I would have loved the stadium to be there and my church to be there. We would have rented out the whole block. But yeah, so it's definitely like a great honor, And I was talking to a young man at my establishment, Smash House, a couple of weeks ago, and he had 5 or 6 young guys with him, and they're all live up north of the river. But he was just saying that how the kids of our generation won't understand what I went through as a kid, and still a diehard Chiefs fan. But we went through quarterbacks like Elvis Gerback and things along those lines. And so
Don't leave out Todd Blackley.
Todd Blackley, yeah, we went through a struggle period, where it was a threat to blackout games a few years. I remember that. It was just, tremendous to see the team succeed the way they do now, where now we are spoiled, in a sense, with winning. That when I was growing up, we won 5 or 6 games, and we beat Oakland. And don't let us beat Oakland and Denver. It was a good year.
That's right.
But now, we Super Bowl or bust. And so I'm happy to be along the ride. I enjoy it. I can't say I don't enjoy it. It's fun. The atmosphere is fun. Even as with season tickets, the longer you hold them, they offer you, ski upgrades and things. And I have made family and friends out there at Section 342, and I told my father, he goes to the games with me, that once his legs get bad and things along those lines, we'll consider moving down then. But for now, we're going to walk to the top because it's just a family atmosphere. And, we all tailgate together in 32-8. And once we get there and we all meet up and we all walk in together, it's just amazing. And as we speak, since we're on the subject of football, the Chiefs just drafted a running back out of Rutgers named Isaiah. He just came in, and they drafted a cornerback right before that. So they're still drafting and adding in, filling players. And as many of us know, the roster is very deep. So all these kids won't make the roster, but if we can find a diamond in the rough, wouldn't that be just special?
And you got to, Reverend Hayes, you got to put in there an inexpensive diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
Because we've gotten those players at a much premium cost, and it's really like if they don't make it, it's okay, and if they do make it, then it's all the more because they usually lock them in for 2 or 3 years, and if they evolve and become good players, they can upgrade their pay. But right now they are bargain, and anybody would love to play for the Kansas City Chiefs at this moment. And so, they'll do anything to sign. Now, I guess that's the business end of football, because it really is a power position. And as you noticed last year, there wasn't a single national commentator that did not pick the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. Not one. Everybody was in complete agreement that the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes would repeat as football national Super Bowl championships. And of course, that did not happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something to piggyback on also was just, the cap space. And when Tyreek left town, I've seen the Mayweather fans and the fans that have jumped on the bandwagon the last few years, they all complain and cry. Oh, but at that moment, I hated to see him leave. He's a special talent, but I knew that we would come out better. And we turned that $30+ million that he ended up getting in Miami into a more well-rounded roster with draft picks that we will have under our control for the foreseeable future here, 4 or 5 years at a nice cheap cost. And then we also have cap space that everyone has kind of forgotten about it. Some of the fans that got frustrated because we haven't went out and signed that big name player. But if we can just draft well and lock in that way, save some cap space, that's going to mean all the world.
Well, I can tell you this, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And, and people forgot McCole Hardman, is still kind of in the background. But,
yes,
he could give Tyreek a run for his money as far as speed goes.
Oh,
yeah, and he needs to be a little more aggressive, and maybe he can't jump as high or jump around like Tyreek, but he's somebody to watch, and he's also from the University of Georgia as well. And so we got the talent, to at least expand on, and I do agree with you. We even ended up with some salary cap room, and to the owners, that's what they like to see, is to stay under the salary cap, come out with a little profit in that area, have some wiggle room, and be able to pay those players who evolve along the way. And, in football language, you don't have a long time to live. And, like you're probably old at 29 or 30. And when I say old in football language. And so you've got a short window or a short opportunity there to show what you're working with. And, of course, I think the Chiefs have taken advantage. And if I were to make one overall comment about the draft is great, not only because they got cheaper players, but because of the fact that they got room to work with in the salary cap, which makes them nice and easy to get along with, about if somebody gets injured, they can trade up for them. And if you look at our players right now, many of our players were paid very cheap at first. Orlando Brown is one example. But along the way, he became the franchise player. And so, there is room to grow both in salary cap and in talent. And so we had a good draft. I agree with you a lot, Reverend Hayes, about what you said about the AAA rating of the draft. We did very well.
Yes, I definitely agree, especially with the extra draft capital and things. We turned those pieces, and I believe in the next year or two, all the fans who made the complaints about the Tyreek trade, we'll be able to sign Orlando Brown back, and we'll continue to build, and if the players turn out as good on paper, in person as they are on paper, we will extend our run. And like I tried to explain to a lot of people when the trade happened, is that, the Patriots only stayed good because they didn't overspend. They stayed inside their budget. They knew what they wanted, and they got it.
And there is something in football that they keep looking for, the low salary star. And Tyreek was, you remember, people didn't want Tyreek here at first. And because he had a lot of off-field baggage. But once they teamed him up with Mahomes, and he caught all those passes. In fact, I can't remember exactly what his stats were. But, then all of a sudden Tyreek Hill became a household name. And, of course, the next year when we went to the Super Bowl and won it, it was like we forget that Tyreek's been around 5 years. And but he was a bargain. He was definitely a bargain. And that's what the Chiefs seem to be best at, is getting bargains or finding bargains. And maybe that's what they did this year.
Yes, and as you mentioned, especially with Patrick Mahomes' salary cap finally somewhat hitting the books, because they converted a lot of it over to a signing bonus, but it's still a big factor. That's how you stay relevant, stay with good players. You got to draft well and get young talent for cheap and not overpay. So, yeah.
Well, that's the business side of football, which is probably more prominent and more important than what happens on the field. But today, somebody told me that the marketing allocation of the draft, it goes to marketing rather than to player personnel. In other words, what they do in the draft and then the combine and all those things, that's charged to marketing. And so at some point it begins to make sense, because you're actually getting everybody to soup up and buy more tickets and tune in more on TV, and sponsors want to pay more because they have been involved in the sports all year round. And so they get to see the players come up and they see where they go. And that's all a part of getting people to sit in the stands and buy the season tickets, like you said.
Pastor Hayes, bring the people maybe who just tune in. People can go on YouTube, they go on Facebook, Apple TV, Smart, and the other, which I got, cell phone, and then also there's 5 podcasters. They go to 5 different countries, and people who want to tune in, all they have to do is go to Ferguson USA Hot Talk Radio.com, and they can go to Ferguson USA website, and as an honor or favor to me, all the shows that I've been doing in the last year, they can retrieve those shows. And today we're very happy that the draft day, and we got 2 expert, young, and we'll say wisdom, instead of saying old granddad, okay? On this show, they both of them are very knowledgeable. So this is a gift from Guess Who's Coming to Kansas City to all you listeners, and we want more people to get involved in this. And we have Mr. Jim Nunley, and we have Pastor Timothy Hayes Jr., and you guys, y'all must know something about radio, because y'all didn't have any dead air. You can have it going. And then, Mr. Nunley, you mentioned newspaper. You still are doing that with the Kansas City Call, aren't you?
That's right. I have written about the Kansas City Chiefs for 52 years every week. I'm the longest running non-paid sports writer in town, in the nation. And I keep telling the front office of the Chiefs that I probably know more about the Chiefs' history than they do. And if you're out there, Reverend Hayes, you'll look around and you notice that most of the Chiefs' history starts when they went to Arrowhead. They have very few pictures or very few understanding, because when they went to the Super Bowl that year, the first year, they actually went as a wild card. So they had to win on the road in order to make it to the Super Bowl. So all of the playoff games, the Chiefs won on the road. And that was the 1969 season, but it was the 1970 Super Bowl when they beat Minnesota 24-7. There was a famous quarterback in Minnesota at that time by the name of Joe Kapp. And, of course, he was sort of a Joe Namath kind of a guy. And, of course, he had predicted that they would just maul the Chiefs. And Lenny Dawson and Otis Taylor that day showed off. They really did. But there was a young player, and it's the only Heisman Trophy winner that we have had in Chiefs history. That's something that you need to look into, Reverend Hayes. It was a young guy out of USC, Heisman Trophy winner. His name was Mike Garrett. Mike scored 2 touchdowns in that Super Bowl game. And, of course, he went on to retire early or got injured or something happened. But what I'm getting at is there's a lot of history in that 22nd and Brooklyn area. And somehow or another, we've got to learn how to revive it, but more importantly, connect it to the black community so that we can be proud, too, of the achievements of the Chiefs. And that's what I write about every week. I bet I have reminded everybody that the Chiefs played at 22nd in Brooklyn long before they ever played at Arrowhead. And I just want to point that out now. Okay?
Definitely. And that is knowledge, and that is a very true statement. Even today, walking around the Ring of Honor and down the around the stadium, you see very little about what happened on 22nd Street. It kind of does pick up, as you stated, in Arrowhead. So that is definitely something that we all should push for more of, the local history and not just the current history.
Well, they've got this phrase running around the world now called critical race theory. And, of course, the objective, or at least the assessment of critical race theory, is that history be written in a way that it excludes certain bad parts of history. Now, I don't think it's a bad thing for the Kansas City Chiefs to have played at 22nd and Brooklyn. In fact, we're pretty proud of that. But somehow or another, the Chiefs don't want to recognize that. And it's not because of the race part, but it's just because I think they just don't know much about it. Because if you look at the roster at that time, it was made up, a good deal of it was made up of the HBCU players. And
explain about what that means.
Okay, it's historically black colleges and universities. That's what the term HBCU says. These were black colleges, black universities that many of the players came from. We mentioned Otis Taylor; he came from Prairie View. And then, of course, there was a guy named Jim Kearney who played. I can't remember where Jim played, but he was a quarterback, and I think he played at Prairie View as well.
He did. He did.
He was a quarterback in college, and very good quarterback. And but when he came here, they made a safety out of it. He became a starting safety. Now, so there's a lot of critical race omissions in the whole shebang of America, but particularly in the league, or the NFL league. Now, of course, we've gone past it. I don't think it, should make the headlines, but it ought to be noted that we have a kinship, a very intimate kinship, with the evolution and rise of the entire AFL or NFL as relates to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think we ought to be proud of that. And I know the Negro Baseball League's Bob Kendricks is going to have on May 6th kind of a walk-around up at 22nd in Brooklyn. But it's kind of a lighthearted thing. This ought to be banners. There ought to be stop signs there. There ought to be all kind of things there that signal the fact of the intimate kinship with the Chiefs and the black community. And you mentioned Lincoln High School there, MC. There were people who went up to the third floor on Lincoln High School and watched the Chiefs game because it was that close to it. Now, what the Chiefs did kind of silently, they did help Lincoln High School build another football field. Are you familiar with that, Reverend Hayes?
Yes, he was out there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, my nephew, Jermaine Hamilton Jordan, who originally committed to the University of Arkansas, he played the first game at the Blue Turf. And of course, it wasn't season tickets or anything, but I didn't miss many games on the Blue Turf. I think this past season, I went to 2 or 3. That was probably the least that I've been out there in the last 3 years since they had built the new stadium. And like I said, I was the team chaplain for Lincoln football team for the last 4.5 years.
Well, I'm very proud to meet you again. I do recognize the name. I can't put the face with it, but you have to. And when he said I'm over 50, I'm really 80. I'll be 80 this summer, and so I'm full of history, but I'm also full of not wanting a whole lot of new stuff in my life because there ain't no room for it.
Sure, yeah, we met. I think most recently when my church was on 29th in Indiana, and we were doing the food giveaways.
Yes, I came by there.
Yes, you did, sir.
Yes, I know.
So, that was the last time that we connected, and I also, courtesy of Mr. Richardson, been a guest in Generational Rap probably 15, 20 years ago or so now. Our most recent meeting was the food giveaways we were holding on 29th in Indiana weekly on Thursdays in the midst of the pandemic.
Yes, I remember that. And I wrote about you. I wrote about churches doing that.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so there was a famous book written. It was called 6 Degrees of Separation. And the idea of the book was that we're not as far apart as we seem to be in this wide world. That there are 6 people between you and somebody that you would never expect to know. And I guess what I'm saying to you is that we've narrowed that down probably to 3 degrees now, and maybe about 20 blocks. So we'll hook up at some point. And thank you, MC, for getting us together.
No, it's really our pleasure, and that's what they do on Guess Who's Coming Kansas City. And now we have another producer, our folks. Come in and tell us something, Ira, because the Chiefs are the only professional football team in the state of Missouri.
Yes, it is, and I am very much honored to have been able to learn a history on the black side, of town about the Kansas City Chiefs, and how much, blacks have played a role, in the development of the team. And I guess one thing I have to ask a question because there's been rumors, I know bad rumors are saying that they're trying to, someone trying to, poach them away from Kansas City. Is there any truth to that?
There's always a rumor for the last 2 or 3 years. There is I don't think there's anything to that rumor, but there is a rumor of trying to build a new stadium downtown. And that's kind of under our way discussions. But I think in the next couple of 3 years, there will be a decision made, to build another stadium. Now, where the downtown people are making quite the case to have a stadium downtown for obvious economic reasons. But there's no way the Kansas City Chiefs are going to leave here in the next 20 years. I mean, they're too vital to the community.
Yes, sir. I agree with you on that 1,000%. Likewise, and I think that not only that, it's something that it's a tradition in the league, with the Chiefs. So I know you got new owners of the team in the last couple of years, and that's why people always have that talk about when you have new owners, ownership change, that rumor comes about.
That's right. Well, we still have to remember that the Chiefs is a business, and somebody's going to come along one of these days with enough money. I mean, like the Cardinals in St. Louis and like the Raiders out of Oakland, to offer them something to come somewhere for an unbelievable amount of money. So we've got to put that in our thoughts, but I don't see that happening anywhere in the next decade or so.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. They're very much, in tune. You said Chiefs, Kansas City. They just go together,
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm really privileged to hook up with you as well, and maybe MC, you ought to have us back during the season or just before the season. Our season opens up with September the 12th with the New England Patriots on a Thursday night game out at Arrowhead. And so they put up a new football television station that's going to sponsor Thursday night games, and that's going to be the biggest promoted game of the year, possibly even of the decade. And so they're going to make Thursday night football like Monday night football was back in the 70s.
Once again, we come to that time that we gotta go. But before we go, we thank our guests for being in today. How you can be reached? You need volunteers as well as making sure you get out and vote.
That's right. All right. Well, you can always call me at the Kansas City call. The number is 816. The number is 842-3804. And talk to Mr. Eric Weston. Leave a message. I'll get back to you. And more importantly, I have a Facebook page, Jim Nunley. Be glad to talk to anybody on Facebook. And by the way, I'm part of the Chiefs diehard followers. And but anyway, I just think it's a great thing. And Reverend Hayes, we're going to do something together before I die. Okay?
That would be an honor for me, just to be able to say that we produced something great, and I know it will be great, and maybe we can produce. This is just the idea that you're on the radio, a generational rap reunion.
Okay.
Bring back all the guests and hosts that you have produced and sent out on amazing journeys around the country, which I know you know oh so well, some of the amazing talent that has come out of your organization in all fields, just not radio. And so we are definitely glad to do that. But I can also be reached via Facebook, Timothy Hayes, and always, can feel free to stop by the church if you're looking for me. 2456 Park Avenue, Kansas City, Missouri. And the church is 24-hour faith training center. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to you.
But what I want to say is that's Thursday night football, and in September, the 16th and 17th, the United Minority Media Association will hold its Midwest Southeast Regional Conference at the MSC Suite, and then also it's twofold. It will be a family reunion for people throughout the United States. That's the Richardsons, that's the Cobb, and all their relatives they send that. It'll be their day at the Yuma Conference, and just give me a call, 816-822-8866, or its own website is Yuma, UMMAHQKC.org. We're updating that, and
Sure,
we also got a young person with our Facebook and our social media, and we're open to a lot of people for want to get involved with, and I did extend an invitation to Mr. Jim Nunley as one of the elite, and what's that other word I added to that, Jim? It started with a distinguished. And that's going to be the night of the evening of the 17th of September. but be sure to join us. And then before they have the meal that evening, we have Reverend Hayes and we have Reverend Harrison. They will give a co-parentship because people are nature and whatever. You got to pray before you dine. And so tell us who you are and how you and your organization can be reached.
Our folks from Missouri Black Chamber of Commerce have to be a part of the program. Our program here is every Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. on Ferguson, USA. OutSideRadio.com. You can call reach me through MC Richardson.
Thank you, and be sure to tune in each and every week. And we bring in new guests. We retain, like Mr. Nunley, Mr. Hayes. From time to time, we do have co-hosts, and both of them are excellent co-host potential. So that's it. And we got so much rain here before I get my garden. And Yuma's going to have a community garden for the Yuma members. But saying that, let's beat those Yankees tonight. Thank you very much. And we out of here. Someone got something to say?
Thank you.
Life is going to be safe.
Goodbye.